TV. This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
The opinions expressed in the following programs are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of Rogers Cable or Rogers TV.
Hello, and thank you for joining Age-Friendly Caledon Conversations. This is a segment series in which we discuss services and supports of interest to seniors and their families. Today's topic is housing. I'm your host, Ken Weber, and the really important people are our guests today from the town of Caledon. We have Bindu Shah, the strategic lead of planning town of Caledon, and Mike Balch, intermediate planner policy, town of Caledon. Welcome.
Thank you.
Pleased to have you. Now, let's begin with these titles, so we just clarify what it is that you do. Bindu, you're strategic lead in the planning department. Tell me what that means.
Sure. This position basically takes care of strategic initiatives such as working with the province or the federal government on new legislative changes or special projects, like we have a community planning permit system coming up. It also makes sure that planning department is working in tandem with all the other departments in the corporation. So basically that's the purpose of this position.
And Mike, I gather, works with you in the department and as intermediate planner policy. You support what's in and work with what Bindu is doing and that type of thing?
Yeah, so my position is specializing in policy. I mostly work in our housing policy development for the planning department as a whole.
So what is the mandate of the planning department? Is it always just housing, or is it other things as well?
So the planning department covers a spectrum of things. Basically, the intent is to ensure that the town of Caledon is developed and operates in a way that is sustainable and sets itself up for future success. So that deals with where housing goes, that deals with where employment goes. It mostly focuses on how we use our land.
That's a huge responsibility. An awful lot of things to consider. So this is for seniors. So I'm going to begin by asking you a question about that concerns every senior that I know, including me. I call it the big decision. Most seniors have lived, and practically every senior, I would say, has lived in their houses for a long time. And there comes a point when they have to make a decision about how we stay here, if we can stay here, or more likely, that fact that eventually they're going to have to change their setting. They're going to have to move to another kind of living condition. Can you give us, and I'm going to ask both of you to answer this, what's the first thing that they can do? Because it's a terribly confusing, awesome task to make this decision. So any hint about one of the first things we should do? Can we start with you, Bindu?
Sure. I think depending on the situation of the household or the seniors, they could either reach out to Age-Friendly Caledon. We have an age-friendly coordinator and a team there to answer their basic questions and basically do a triage to support them with services. But specifically in terms of housing, they can look at the available housing options in Caledon, get in touch with the town to look into what options are in the pipeline, and also make sure that the neighborhood plans are kind of well introduced. If you look at a neighborhood plan, it tells you how that neighborhood is supposed to grow, what kind of housing options are going to be entering into that neighborhood for the residents to avail of, and those are plans that the planning department can share with the residents.
So you can, as a citizen of Caledon, I can actually contact the planning department directly for this kind of information. But in addition, of course, to beginning with Age-Friendly Caledon, which will steer me in the right direction.
For sure.
So Mike, you must have something to add to that too.
Yeah.
The first step, what would you do?
Of course, as Bindu said, reaching out to Age-Friendly Caledon, they're going to be the best bet for explaining what services are available. But the idea with our planning and our planning policy is to ensure that the range of options and supports are available where they're needed for our residents. So in order to accommodate folks making this hard decision, we want to ensure that there are options that are supportive to that decision, whatever that may be. So if folks are looking for, more accessible spaces, we have policies that ensure that, these spaces are, barrier-free, are universally accessible, or there are options if you just want a, smaller scale of living. That might be a different form of house than you're typically used to. So you might be going from a single detached multi-level house. That might mean you're moving to a townhouse that's a bungalow with only one level, or a condo apartment style.
These would be private ownership. We'll get to money in a minute and subsidizing, but one of the decisions would be if you're moving out of your home, as you suggested, let's say multi-level, and into a condo or an apartment or a senior's residence or something of that nature. These are things for which you would support yourself. You have to undertake this with your own money, right?
So it would depend on the scenario that you're looking for, and the idea is to offer all scenarios. So if you are comfortable still living on your own, comfortably independent, and you still want to live in a something that you own, there would be options for that. But there are other options that we're wanting to ensure, such as purpose-built rentals or more supportive housing, like you were describing.
There's also a new provincial decision that allows you to have a little garden suite in your backyard. So it's like a little bungalow that you can rent out, or you can yourself move into and rent out your primary home. These are some of the policy changes that allow people to have many options now, and the province and us are all working closely together to make that happen.
Can I ask you to elaborate on that just a little bit more? And I don't want to get very personal, but I had the experience perhaps 20 years ago of investigating that garden suite possibility in Caledon, and I ran into a wall. So that has changed now?
That has changed completely. It's going to be allowed as of right. Of course, you have to meet some parameters like how much setback you leave from your property line, how high it should be, things like that, for which our planning department can help you sort that out. They look at your lot size and tell you exactly what you can or cannot do on your property there.
But
it's allowed as
you
of
now
right.
can do
it. Yes, as long as you have services. Like water, wastewater. Yeah.
Oh, indeed. Yes, yes. That's understood. Yeah. So that one of the options then for people who want to age in place would, and probably make coordinate a plan with their family, would be to build a garden suite. Does it have to be attached to the main building, or it can be separate?
It has to be separate, but within
Excuse me, did you say
has to be separate,
okay.
Detached. But there's other options like a basement or a loft suite, which I don't know if it will be good for seniors. But basically it means that you can have up to 2 second units in your main house, or you can have one in the main house and one in your garden as a garden suite. So basically every lot will now allow 3 units. One is your main house, one is another unit within your main house, and one is a garden suite.
That's very valuable information, and it also suggests that the policies now are more liberal than they were when I investigated this 20 years ago. Really worthwhile. So in addition to that possibility, these are all supported, these are supported by yourself. I mean, you undertake the finance for this kind of thing. Suppose I want to make a move, or a senior wants to make a move, that, and they're short of money. They need assistance with this, financial assistance to begin with. What are the possibilities for that, Mike?
So that would be something that we'd cover through our various affordability policies. Bindu is actually our specialist in that, in terms of what we have with the province.
Well, why don't you take that then, Bindu?
So I think right now what the province is doing is making sure that enough affordable housing is built, whether it's by nonprofits or by developers, private or nonprofit market. They want to make sure that a certain number of affordable houses are built right from the get-go in any big development. So they're working towards that. But in terms of what is actually affordable, there is definitions and thresholds that we have to adhere by, and not everybody would fall under that definition. So basically, there are some incentive programs too that one can avail of, and that's best to talk to our age-friendly coordinator and the planning department to figure out which programs are valid in which jurisdiction, because there's 3 levels of government here, right? So that's the role of incentives in that. But otherwise, you have to kind of figure out where there's affordable housing being built and offered, whether there's any retirement homes, and whether there's any subsidies being considered for that.
When you say 3 levels of government, that is in the production or the manufacture or the building of affordable housing?
Or maintenance too.
And
the maintenance, there are buildings that are built and maintained by the same nonprofit agency. There are some that are built by the private market, but then maintained by the nonprofit agencies.
Okay, so if a senior wants to avail himself or herself of this situation of an affordable housing, what's the process? Do you apply to you, planning department, or do you go elsewhere?
I think currently it's the region taking care of that centralized wait list. There is a wait list for people who want affordable housing. Depending on their household conditions and financial conditions, they are considered and placed in various situations. There's all kinds of housing being offered: transitional, emergency shelters, rental, affordable rental, and there are some programs that are also looking at placing residents into brand new developments. So there's a variety. There's no one answer. There's a range of things you could do. You can contact, again, the age-friendly coordinator who will happily help you.
But there is a procedure.
There's a process. And
let's say that the individual applying needs some financial assistance to do that. Does that also come from the planning department, and do you have to seek elsewhere for that? Can you tell us that one, Mike?
That would be largely outside of the scope of the planning department, but there are services at the town that would be able to direct you.
So you can get advice and be given a place to go with it. All right, we are coming up close to our break time. Perhaps we can get one quick response in. Mike, can you tell us the difference between a senior's residence and an assisted living residence?
Yeah, so between the options, there are different levels of care. So of course, with some folks, there's going to be different levels of independence. And in the case of in the case of a senior's residence, that's going to be more of a community style approach, whereas a more care style home is going to be one which integrates actual support.
So it's basically the intensity of what's involved.
Exactly,
Yes.
exactly.
There we go. And these are available in Caledon.
There are some options at this point, but we are working to expand that.
Expand.
Yeah.
Good. That'll be a good point to come to our break, which is imminent. We'll come back to that a little more about what is available in Caledon. I'm speaking to Bindu Shaw and Mike Balch of the Town of Caledon Planning Department. We'll be right back.
Oh, hi there. I'm Mark Grice, the artist, and I'm just preparing another canvas with a sketch on it that I'm going to paint for you in my show called Mark Grice, the Artist. I start out with a photograph in my hand, and in 1 hour I complete a painting right before your eyes. Now I got to get back to work getting it sketched out on the canvas so you can watch the show right here on Rogers TV.
back. We're back with Mike Balch and Bindu Shaw from the Planning Department, Town of Caledon, and we're talking about housing, particularly housing for seniors. And Mike, you have a clarification on garden suites, because I'm afraid that's my fault. I got really excited about that one. Gardens, tell us what that clarification is.
So garden suites are a type of additional residential unit. And in the past, garden suites have been a form of housing which was temporary by nature. So the way they were permitted was via a temporary use permit on a property. Now, what we're working towards doing is legalizing the permanent use of those structures, or the development of new purpose-built structures that can last in perpetuity on a property.
Well, thank you for that clarification. And I think it's an important point, because we in Caledon, unlike a lot of municipalities, have a lot of big lots. Yeah. We have room and spaces for this kind of option for additional housing. And on that basis of successful planning approaches that municipalities are using, what are some of the things that municipalities like Caledon can do to expand the housing, particularly housing available for seniors?
There's a lot, and thanks for that question. We at the planning department deal with policy planning. We plan for the next growth, and Caledon, as you know, is one of the fastest growing municipalities till 2051 at least. So when we plan for this growth, we make sure that there is a range of housing options that are going to be planned for the residents of Caledon. And housing that is built across the spectrum means it starts from your affordable transitional shelter housing, right, to affordable rental, to ownership. So all kinds of housing have to be offered to the residents. Only then can they everybody can find something that they truly fit into and can afford at their level. So we have policies in the new official plan that Mike is working on. The official plan policies are very broad. They will allow a range of housing, which was not the case for many municipalities till now. So more and more folks are now opening up their policies to allow a range of housing anywhere across town. And also the zoning bylaws. As you know, zoning is pretty important to get something approved. So sometimes, and most of the time, zoning restricts where you can build what. So the more restrictions there are, the more that you won't get what you need, right? The kind of housing that you need. So we are in the process of exploring our zoning bylaw and making sure that it expands to include a range of housing options for seniors, for example, and for all housing typologies. That's the biggest thing that developers need to build the kind of housing that they want to build, because sometimes these are all stumbling blocks. So we are trying to remove the barriers, just as other municipalities are doing. There is other policies that the province and us are working together. We spoke about the garden suites one. There's something called adaptive reuse. So if you have older houses, how can you adapt them to suit your new needs? There's a concept of visitability, meaning your front porches should be accessible through a wheelchair. You don't have steps anywhere. Your main floor shouldn't have steps in between. So when a developer comes in, if it's a new housing, we tell him that please reserve some of these lots to have this kind of housing possible there that seniors can easily get in and out of, and they can visit their friends. So the concept is called visitability. So we are exploring that. There's another thing that you have old heritage houses in Caledon, and some of them are really well maintained. Converting these heritage houses to something called accessible housing for seniors is a new planning regime that's building up gaining momentum across the world. So that's something we are exploring too. And there is a lot of incentive programs. Many municipalities have incentives for people to build a certain kind of housing. So they will be exempt from fees, for example, or developer charges if they provide something that the town needs. So these are called incentive programs, and Caledon is exploring the use of incentive programs. So that means that we'll be able to attract the kind of housing we need, and we won't just leave it to the market. We have more of a control over what we want in Caledon based on Caledon's needs, which are different from, let's say, Brampton's needs or Mississauga's needs. So those are targeted incentive programs that can really help out get the housing that we are lacking in terms of housing typologies.
You must have a very busy desk. Obviously, there's an awful lot of...
There's a lot of things you can do in terms of housing options, and that's the basic concept. Affordable housing versus housing affordability, right?
That's an interesting concept. Would you pursue that? One of you pursue the housing affordability versus affordability versus affordable housing. They're different concepts, aren't they?
Yeah, one of the main focuses that we've tried to integrate into our policy is the concept of natural affordability. So by introducing options for various levels of income, of need, we're able to match people better with what they can reasonably afford and what is reasonable for them to attain. So, for example, not everyone needs a large-scale single-detached house, but if we can bring to market more condominium-style houses, that allows them to get into the ownership market at a much lower price, ideally, just by providing options.
Would that be more complicated in Caledon with its wide areas and its topography, a lot of the hills that we have, than it would be? I mean, for example, in Brampton, which is tighter and more level country.
We're working on expanding our settlement area as it is right now. And through that process, we're trying to get ahead of it by not introducing sprawl, as a lot of municipalities have grown, and then infilling after. What we're trying to do is build that level that we want to see right away. We want to build in the best practices off the start. And so by doing that, we can plan communities that are complete, meaning that there's various housing types for various people, and they can access the needs that they would otherwise.
That's really it, yeah. You're making me wish I was a younger senior. I'd like to be around when all this bears fruit. It's really quite impressive. So let's go back to something that has come up here twice now, is affordability versus affordable housing. And I think a lot of people, including me, are confused about the difference.
I can maybe try that. So affordable housing is something that's defined. There's a particular definition. The federal government has a definition, provincial government has a definition, we have a definition. That particularly means that what low and medium income households can afford in terms of housing costs. So if you own a house, the cost of the mortgage, whatever you need for the housing costs, shouldn't exceed 30% of your gross income. And that's the definition, right? So it's very complicated, but I'm breaking it down to a simple definition. More than 30% of your income shouldn't go towards your rent or your mortgage. And that defines it as an affordable unit. Housing affordability is a much broader term. It means that there is various housing options, like Mike mentioned, for your particular situation. It means that there's transportation available. It's a complete community. You can walk to retail. So that means you're spending less on other things that make sure that your total affordability is maintained, that you can afford to live in that place. It's not just the cost based on an income definition. So that's a broader concept.
I see. One of the issues in Caledon would necessarily be the size of the town and the fact that we already have intact communities that are quite some distance from one another. If someone, say, from Cheltenham wants to find affordable housing in, say, Palgrave, they've got to go completely across the town, probably to an area that they have not had much to do with in their lives. I'm assuming this comes into the planning as well. I mean, the fact that we have these separate communities. How do you account for that? Or is the object to build individual community settlements?
I think in Caledon, in the new areas, it's a different story. But what you're talking about is existing hamlets and existing areas. There is a certain percentage of growth that we are going to provide for those areas versus the growth in the new areas. And the difference is stark. It's less growth in these areas versus more in the newer areas. So it's basically 5 and 95%, that kind of difference. It's broad. So that means that there's not a lot of growth anticipated in these communities, but we are going to build those communities out. So we'll see what's missing in there: retail, industry, commercial, employment, housing options, and we are going to build those communities out. So that's the plan for now until we get more transit and better connectivity between these communities.
Obviously, you have to be involved with provincial and federal regulations, and do the provincial and federal resources enable you to move smoothly on this?
Recently, there's been a big focus from both levels, the upper levels of government, on housing. So we are happy that we are kind of working with them and in partnership with them. They've given us housing targets, so we are trying our best to meet those targets, and they really support us in many ways.
Well, does that mean there's going to be particular influence from federal and provincial on, or do you get pretty good Caledon control?
We work together. It's a collaboration. So Caledon does have a say in what we want and how we can grow. At the larger frame of the region and the province, there are certain decisions that we need to respect. So
really, but it really is such a hot topic. There's just so much going on. It's encouraging to hear you speak, because it means that there's certainly people thinking about what has to be done, and things are happening. Mm-hmm. It's not something that is just talked about. There's actually process going on. So I think we're just about out of time here, and I wish there was another half hour so we could expand a little more on some of these things, because but you've left us some hope. It's hopeful. It looks positive. We've been talking to Mike Balch, Intermediate Planner Policy, Bindu Shah, Strategic Lead Planning, both from the town of Caledon. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
This is the end of our segment on housing from Age-Friendly Caledon Conversations. Thank you for joining us today. On your screen will appear some sources of information. I'm going to read them anyway. You can find out more about housing, more about anything related to Age-Friendly Caledon by dialing 311, by emailing adult55@caledon.ca, or visiting online the website at www.caledon.ca/adult55, where, by the way, you can sign up for an excellent and free e-newsletter. It comes out monthly, and it's very informative and very worthwhile. Thank you again for watching, and thank you again, Sindhu and Mike.
Thank you.
Now we should.
Connect with us by visiting our website or email us at comments@rogerstv.com.
October 5th, 2014, my daughter was hit by a train. She was walking along the sides of the tracks, and it shattered her world.
It isn't the heavy trays that make the job difficult, or the fast pace you need to keep up. It's not working another double because someone called in sick.